So I will share my screen now so that we can run some of the things that we need to, do with Kali. I guess we can all see my screen clearly.
How are you?
Please mute your mic if you're in class. Just go ahead and mute your mic so that you will not disturb us, right? Please mute your mics. Thank you very much. So I will go ahead and share my screen. And I guess we can all see my screen clearly. So I'm firing up my virtual box. I believe everybody should have the virtual box installed by now. Please, if you don't have a virtual box installed by now, please, you can drop on the comment section. You can drop that on the comment section. Let me know. Does everybody have their virtual box installed? Just write yes or no. Let's get to know, right? So please let us know. Let us know. Do we all have our virtual box installed? Okay. Okay. So by now, it's expected that we all have our virtual box installed and running, right? Because we don't want us to, be delaying in carrying out the tasks that we are supposed to carry out. So I'll go ahead and fire my virtual box because I believe from the pool here, it's just one person that has not yet installed their virtual box. So everybody have installed their virtual box. Is it everybody that have Kali running on their system? Does everybody have Kali running on their system already? Or a Linux-based operating system? Let's go ahead and look at that also, right? If you have a Linux-based operating system running already on your PC, please go ahead and, write yes, let me hear. Linux-based, whether it is Ubuntu, whether it is Kali, whatever it is. Okay, download was done late. Whichever way, go ahead and load your Kali, your machine, right? So whether it is Kali, whether it is Ubuntu, we are going to look at the both of them, right? So you permit me to go ahead and power up my machine. So I'll be powering up the Kali Linux that I have here and also the Ubuntu machine, right? So I'll power the both of them up so that we can, play around with the both of them. For instance, I told us yesterday that most times these Linux-based operating systems are developed or built, to meet a particular, requirements, right? And most of us, like myself, I like using Kali because Kali, comes with a lot of tools and features embedded in it. And it is a one-stop shop tool for every hacker, right? Because all of the tools that you need are within the Kali machine. But the Ubuntu, if you are using the Ubuntu, most of the tools you've been using or you'll be needing, you have to install them, right? You have to install them. Those of us using Ubuntu. So that is why we have always advised the use of Kali. For me, I prefer using the Kali machine for my, as my operating system. So we are loading the both machines. You can see them running side by side, both my Kali machine and my Ubuntu machine. They are running side by side. So we'll test and play around them. So please, for those of us that have not installed, you can go ahead and install them. But like I told us, this class is going to be hands-on, practical. So we will not delay in doing that. What we are going to be looking at today, yesterday we looked at lab setup, right? Which I have expected that by now, everybody should have their lab set up this way. Somebody is saying I didn't tell us this yesterday. About what, right? About the Ubuntu and Kali. No, Ubuntu also has its own advantage, right? Ubuntu has its advantage, like I think it is more like a GUI-based operating system, just like a Windows machine, right? But you will still have to install almost all the tools that you will need, just like we do on our Windows operating system. You have to install all that you need, right? So the both sides, the both of them are still fine. You can use any of them, but I prefer using the Kali, right? So I will be playing around this, the both operating system. So what we'll be looking at today is to look at some of the commands, how to navigate around the Linux operating system. So if you say today's course is about Linux, you will not be missing it, right? So today's course is strictly about the Linux operating system. We want to move around the Linux operating system and play about it, right? And you can see I have my Ubuntu on the left-hand side, and I have the Linux, the Kali on the right-hand side, right? But the Kali is still coming up, so let's wait a while for it to finish loading, right? So on Ubuntu, you can see all of the tasks and all of the tools, just like we have our toolbar on our Windows-based. So can you still hear me, please?
Yeah, we can hear you very clearly.
Okay. So like what I was saying, we have these machines running side by side, and we can play around them. So in Ubuntu, you can see the toolbars by the left-hand side, just like we have our toolbar of our Windows operating system by the bottom of the operating system. And then we also have the quick menu bar of our Kali machines up here, right? I guess we can all see my mouse on the Kali machine, right? So these are just what we have. And like I told us, one of the advantage of virtualization is to enable us, navigate around. Just like you can see, we are actually navigating around. We can navigate between the Windows operating system, Ubuntu operating system, and then Kali machine, right? So in Kali, most times, if you want to navigate around or move around, you use the terminal emulator. Rather, let me not say in Kali, let me say in a Linux or in all Linux-based operating systems, right? You make use of the terminal user interface, right? So the terminal user interface, you can get that of Ubuntu when you come to the, I guess we can all see the terminal on our Ubuntu machine, right? So these are the terminals. So what I just did was to have, come to the point where I have the all programs here, and I just navigated to terminal. You can see the terminal. So like I told us, Ubuntu have several other tools that looks more like our Windows operating system, right? So, and I also told us that for me, I prefer using the Kali-based operating system. So you can see the shortcut for the terminal is just here. You can click it and open it, right? So for you to navigate around the operating system itself, you need to know some Linux-based commands, right? So there are actually a lot of them, but we are going to be looking at key ones, of the key commands, right? Now, these are the commands that will enable you navigate around a system. So even if you carry out a hack successfully, and you're sitting on your target machine, for instance, you should be able to, move around the target machine that you have, successfully, entered, right, or penetrated, right? So you need to know commands, because most times when you successfully hack a machine, what you will be seeing most times is not, your normal desktop, just like what we have on our Windows machine or on the Ubuntu machine. So you'll be seeing most times, you'll be seeing the shell, right? This black screen that we have here. This is what you'll be seeing most times. So you need to know the commands that you use to navigate around them, right? So also this terminal we have opened, it is actually the user terminal. What we have here now is the user terminal. So you can see we have Kali at Kali. That is why most times if your machine gets locked, you can put Kali as a username and Kali as a password. So Kali is the username and password for Linux. But for Ubuntu, when you are installing it, there will be a point where you have to specify your username and your password. So on my Ubuntu machine, you can see that I specified Peter and Peter. I specified Peter as my username and Peter as my password. Actually, it is not your password that is showing here, but it's just that this is the default, right? And that is why it is showing this way. So maybe in advanced classes, we'll see how you can toggle around setting up all of these things from the boot menu, from the boot process, right? Where you can hide some of these things and change them, right? But for today, we want to, get our hands dirty with Kali Linux, or with Linux rather, with Linux-based operating system. Please, if I am saying Kali Linux, just understand that I'm referring to both of them because I am quite familiar with Kali, right? And that is why I am using the word Kali. Actually, they are both Linux-based operating systems and can be used to perform the same task. So the first command we will be looking at is a command we refer to as the PWD command. The PWD command, right? PWD stands for print working directory. Now, what does the print working directory command helps you achieve? It helps you to know the location that you are in, right? The location that you are in. So for instance, I told us the user here is Kali. So it's telling me that I'm in the home of the user, Kali, right? I'm in the home of the user, Peter, on my Ubuntu. Is that fine? So print working directory tells you the actual location, the working directory that you are sitting. How is this important? This is important in the sense that if I successfully hack, for instance, I successfully hack the Ubuntu machine from my Kali machine, right? And I want to know if I am in the Ubuntu machine. I'll just go ahead and type PWD. If I type PWD and it's still telling me that I'm in home/Kali, I will definitely know that my attack is not successful. But if I do PWD on my Kali machine and it is giving me home/Peter, I will definitely know that I have successfully penetrated this system, and then I'm having that system on this machine. Now, know that the Kali machine that we have here and the Ubuntu machine that we have here are two separate operating systems. So Mr. John might be having, the Ubuntu running on his system, and I am having Kali running on my system, right? And I am carrying out a penetration test or a hack, right? And I successfully penetrated his system. And I type the PWD, it should be able to tell me whether I am still within my system or I am in my target machine, right? Now, there's another command that is very important. We refer to that command as the Google of Linux-based operating system. That command is the man command, right? We call it the man command. I guess everybody
I'm sorry, Mr. Peter, your MIC is muted.
Wow. So my mic has been muted all this while, and I've been talking to the air. Yeah. Okay, so let's proceed. So we are looking at the man command. Thank you for that observation, please. We are looking at the man command, and I think people have been saying it on, the charts. Unfortunately, I wasn't looking at that. So let me keep it on so that in case there's anything, if you draw my attention, I'll be able to see it. So I should go back to PWD. That's what somebody is saying. Okay, so we're looking at PWD, and we told us that PWD prints the working directory, the current working directory of the machine. And I told us also that for you to know how important the PWD is, you can easily, when you carry out an hack and you're sitting on your target machine, you can just do the PWD to, check and know whether you have successfully entered that machine. You are successfully Wow. Any command that you're not familiar with and you want to know more about, what you need to do is to man that command. So I can go ahead and man PWD to read more about PWD. So actually the man command is the Google of the Linux-based operating system. So you can man whatever it is that you want to man. Although there are actually some commands that does not have manual entry for them, that the Linux-based machine does not have manual entry for them, right? Otherwise, it has manual entry for a lot of commands around it. So we have looked at two commands. The third command we'll be looking at is the clear command to clean your screen, right? So the clear command cleans the screen, right? So that is what the clear command does, right? So we have looked at the first command, which is PWD, the second command, which is the man command, and then the clear command. So there's another command we will look at, which is the history command. So you can see that history will bring back all of what we have done, right? So in Ubuntu, it's bringing back all the things that I've ever done on this Ubuntu machine, right? And also what I have done on my Linux machine. So how is this important? How is this command important? This command is important in a sense that if maybe you are carrying out a forensic investigation and you eventually penetrated a system, right? And you want to check to know all what has been done on that system, right? You can actually use the history command to, get all of the commands and all of the things that have been done on the system, right? So that is the history command. Is that okay? So another important command is the ls command. The ls command is a command that lists out the items in the current directory that you are working on. So for instance, if you eventually carry out a hack and you're sitting on another system, right? Your target machine now, at times you might just be seeing a blank screen, right? So if you do your PWD and you discover that you are in the target machine, what next will you want to do? You want to see the content of that machine, right? So the ls command is actually the command that you use to see the content of that particular location that you are. right? So for instance, our machine, as we have them here, our desktop, you know, when you boot your system, it takes you directly to your desktop and it allows you to see all of the icons on your desktop, right? So this is what Windows or Microsoft actually did. What Microsoft did was to have redesigned, you know, the ls command, right? And then pushed all of the items that the ls command can list out for you, and then redesigned it into graphics and drop them in a particular location called either the desktop, your documents, your download, and all whatnot, right? So that is what Google have done, Microsoft did for us. So you can see that the ls command in the directory that we are is synonymous to these folders that we have here, right? You can see they are actually synonymous. So when you navigate or when you enter the user system, you can see that these commands that are here are the same commands that we have here, right? These folders that we have here are likely the same folders that we have here. The desktop, the document, the download, the favorites, you know, some of these ones are just, you know, these are programs that I've written and you see them just appearing there. Otherwise, you will not see all of these things there, right? When you see the key programs, the key folders that are supposed to be on the user folder. So what it just did was to beautify this into desktop icon like what we have here and presented it for us so that we like it and we pay for what we are using, right? Otherwise, this is how it appears or it's supposed to appear, right? So the ls command on your user tab enables you to, you know, view all the contents of that location. Now, the ls command is very important. It's a very important command because it is actually your eye, the eye that you use in Kali, right? You know, I told us the man command is like the dictionary. The ls command is like the eye of the operating system because it is what shows you, or it is a command that you use to see everything that is, you know, whether it is hidden or it is, you know, just placed on a particular location, the ls command. So the ls command has several other options, right? Several other features, several other switches that you can use to, you know, narrow or filter your searches. For instance, I want to search for a particular thing, right? So the ls command, it has options that you can use to do that. So if you want to learn more about the ls command, we can just go ahead and man the ls command. You can see what the ls command does. You see it lists out directory contents. It lists out directory content, and this is the synopsis, how to write it. So you can write ls, then you specify option from any of these options, right? Then the file. So depending on the location that you are, for instance, if I'm in a particular location, let me use the Ubuntu, for instance, I want to ls desktop. I want to know the content of desktop. What I will just do is ls, right? Then I can specify an option. Note that this is -a is an option here. I can say -a, right? I can say -a, right? Then the file is desktop, for instance, right? So it would actually give me the content of the desktop folder. So there's nothing on the desktop. That is why you see it's giving us ... right? So, but if there was something on the desktop, it's actually going to give me the list of the items on the desktop. What if I don't want the items on the desktop? I just want ls-a. Since I'm within that particular location, that very location, if I do the ls-a and press enter, it will list out the content of that you know, file, that particular location for me, including all the files that appears to be hidden, right? So in Kali, most times when a file is hidden, it carries a dot in front of it, right? It carries a dot in front of it. So this switch, the -a switch, you can see here what it does. It does not ignore entries starting with a dot. So any entry starting with a dot, which invariably is a hidden file, if you use the -a or the --all switch or option when doing your ls or when using your ls command, right? It helps list out everything that is within that location. You can see that I actually listed out both the desktop, the document, the download, the downloads, the pictures, the public, the videos, the templates. It listed all of them, including the hidden ones, including the hidden files, right? So this is actually good in forensics in the sense that you are actually carrying out an audit and you just go to the system and type ls. So when you type ls and it lists out this file, these files as it is here, if maybe another forensic examiner comes in or another investigator comes in and uses the ls-a, you definitely know that he will get more, items listed out than what you got. And definitely it means your work is useless, right? So most times we make use of the ls-a. And also how this is also important is this. You have successfully penetrated the system and you go and use ls. It's showing you only this, not the hidden files. But most times those files that contain sensitive documents are always hidden, right? So you use the ls-a to, try to open the hidden files also. Is that okay? I hope we are together. Is my mic still muted? Okay.
No, sir.
No.
Okay, so let's go ahead. So that is the ls-a. We can add other switches. You can see there are so many switches for ls. Now, just understand that what I have done is I'm using the Kali Linux or the Kali for, the manual, right? I'm running it on the Ubuntu, right? The both of them can be used for the same thing. I can actually decide to run it or do vice versa on the both of them, right? I can decide to run my manual on Ubuntu and then run, what's it called? Run the task on Kali, right? So just understand ls-a does that. So like I'm saying, we have other options, but the two important options we'll be looking at is the -a, which we have talked about, and also the -l. So use a long listing format. Now, why we decide to talk about this too, you can go ahead and read other options. Fill with a comma separated list of entries, right? So that is what this -m does, right? So you can go ahead and look at them. But the two main options we'll be interested in is the -a and the -l. So we have seen the -a. Let's look at the -l. So what the -l does is to provide a long listing. It lists out the folders or the items that. So it lists them in a large, in a long listing format. That's to say, if you include the -l, right, it will tell you other contents of, the particular file. For instance, the other content of this file to describe them for you, right? So let's go ahead and try that. So we'll do ls-l, right? You can see that it's listed desktop, all of these files that are here, right? It listed all of them. And it's actually doing that with a long listing format, telling us other, criteria, other features of that particular file, right? So when is the file created? April 13, at the time the file was created, the length of that file, right? The length of that file, the user and the guest, right? The user and the root, the user and the guest actually, because we have maybe we'll have to look at some of these permissions when we delve deep into it. We'll look at some of these permissions, right? The user and the guests, right? That have access to this file, right? And now it's also showing us the permissions of this file, right? If you look at here, we have two. That's to say, it's only two people or two persons that have access to this file, which is the user and the guest, right? Now we have the permissions here of this file. What can be done on this file, right? So permissions, like I told us, understanding permissions or knowing permissions is one of the criteria we need for this class, actually. But I'll still go ahead and explain some of them. Those of us that are into or that are in computer science, we know, we definitely have talked about, they must have come across the term permissions, right? Where you grant the read, write, executable access to maybe a file, to a particular file, right? You can grant the read, write, executable access to a file. So this is what is showing us here. It's telling us here that, okay, we have this particular file, the desktop. The first item here is D, showing you that it is actually a directory, right? So it is a directory. The first item showing that it is a directory. So the D stands for directory. Then it's telling you that the directory has the read, write, and executable permission enabled for the root. So it is only the root user that can actually delete this folder. That is what it's saying here. So the user, which is the second permission level from this point where we have the second arrow, it is read, write, execute, arrow WX, read, write, execute for the user, and then read, write, execute for the guest. So the user and the guest, right, does not have the right permission on this folder. That is to say, you cannot delete this folder or recreate it, right? But you can open this folder. You can also put something inside the folder, which is reading the folder, and you can also copy something out of the folder, right? So you don't have rights. The rights permission is disabled on this folder. So that is what it is saying here, right? So when we continue and we start creating programs, we will learn more about granting permissions, because some of the programs we'll be creating or some of the programs you'll be downloading online, you will need to grant them permissions before you can install them, right? So if you decide to say, okay, you want to use the ls-l and a, right? So if you're combining multiple options, there's no need doing this -l and -a. There's no need doing it that way, right? You can just add all of the options that you want to put together, right? So if I do this, you see that it lists out, including the hidden files, right? The files that have the dot in between, before them, right? And it's giving us also their permissions, right? And the number of persons that have access to them, right? The type of access that is assigned to them, the number of bytes, the day they were created, and the time they were all created, right? So as a forensic examiner or as an investigator or as someone carrying out penetration testing, if maybe somebody has, attacked your system successfully and dropped maybe a malware, and he has hidden that malware on the system, right? So you can use the read, write, executable permission to, restrict permissions of that malware, right? You can just come here and enable or disable permissions, right? So we'll look at that as we proceed or as we progress, right? But we use what we call the change mode, the CH mode, to actually change permissions. So we'll look at that as we move forward. So that is that for the, the second, the third or fourth. I think that should be the fifth command that we are looking at, right? Let me do our history to see how many commands we have covered. So we have looked at PWD, we have looked at man, we have looked at, clear, history, ls, right? So that's 6, right? So let's go ahead and look at more commands. The next command we'll be looking at is the cd command. CD stands for change directory, right? I told us moving from one place to another. It's actually a very important command because it enables you to move from one location to another, right? On your system, on your machine. Unlike you just using your mouse. Okay, somebody is saying I should go over the permissions again. Okay, like I told us, permissions are granted to every file that you have installed on your machine, right? There are permissions granted to those files. I made mention of those of us that maybe have been into IT or computer science. Definitely you should have learned about permissions before now, right? And understanding permissions, the read-write executable access that are granted to file is one of the prerequisite knowledge for this class, right? So it's expected that you should understand that. So what I just did was to explain more about permissions. So if you look at, let me use one of these documents or one of these files to explain permissions to us, right? So if you look at the documents folder, for instance, the first item here is telling you that it is a directory. That's why you see a D in front. If it is just a file or a tool, like a software that you want to install, you will not see the deal in front. You just see the dash, just like we can see in this this point, right? So when you see the dash, starting with the dash, just know that it is a file. But when you see it starting with a D, know that it is a directory. So as a forensic person or as an investigator, you should be able to know how many directories you have when carrying out an investigation, right? You should be able to record or in your report, write down how many directories that were found when you penetrated into the system, and how many files that were found, how many of them were hidden, what were the content of those files, right? So as an investigator, these are the things you look out for, right? So I was explaining permission, and I told us that we have permissions for roots, permissions for the user, and permissions for the guest account, right? So the root account is just like your system admin. So what this whole thing is telling us in the first read, write, execute, because as you can see, there are 9 or 10 items. The ones that are directory, there are 10 items. The ones that are files, there are 9, there are actually 10. In fact, in all of them, there are actually 10 items, because the ones that there are no items, you see a dash in them, right? Just this dash that we are seeing. So there are always 10 dashes, right? So the first dash is to show whether the file is a directory or a file. So if it is a directory, you see a D in front of it. If it is a file, you will see a dash in front of it, right? The next first 3 lines or first 3 items we have there is for the root. That is the root privilege, right? So you can see that the root have the read, write, executable permission for this particular file. Let me use this file that I'm using. So the root has the read, write, executable permission. That's to say, somebody in the root user or the root user in this system can actually delete or recreate this folder, right? So that is the first permission, the read, write, executable, right? So the next permission is the arrow -X, right? That's to say there is read, but there is no write, and there is execute. That is to say the user, who is the second person in command here, right, can read this file, can open this file. That's what we mean by reading. You can open this file, you can save in this file, and by saving, you are executing something on the file, right? But you cannot write this file, you cannot write into this file. That's to say you cannot edit this file, you cannot, delete this file, for instance. That is, you don't have the permission to delete this file, but you can open the file and then read the content within the files, put content in the file or folder rather, as the case may be. And also the guest user also does not have that permission of writing into this directory. I guess we understand that better. So we'll be looking at it as time goes on. I just want us to have a general knowledge on this, the read, write, executable, whatever. And like I told us, I didn't want us to be looking at, PowerPoint slides or slide presentation and be doing too much of the talking. So let's see them as they are. And also, we will have materials. We will have a material, right, as we progress. All of those things will be explained in details there, right? But just for the sake of the class, let's move or let's forge ahead, right? So that is that. That is the command for permission. So we are going to look at that as we progress. So another command I was telling us to look at was the CD command, right? The CD command stands for change directory. So you can move from one location to another. So if I man CD, I think there's no manual for CD, right? So there's actually no manual for CD, but just understand that CD stands for change directory. So you can change from one directory to another. So for instance, if I do my ls and I notice that I have desktop here, what I will just do is to CD, I can do CD to desktop or to any location I want to go to, right? You notice that my location has now changed to desktop. So I'm on my desktop. Is that okay? But initially I was not on my desktop. But now I'm on my desktop. So I told us CD stands for change directory. Use it to change from one directory to another. So for you to actually change from one directory to another, you should be able to, you should know the directory you are changing to. I want to move from one location to another. I should know my destination, right? And by knowing our destination, it means you should know the full directory part of that directory. For instance, this is the full directory part of my desktop. This is the full directory part of my desktop. The ampersand or a tilde, this is a tilde actually. The a tilde sign slash desktop is the full location of my desktop. The a tilde itself, you can see the a tilde here. While we had not navigated to our desktop, you can see that the a tilde here is the user, that's the working directory or the initial working directory where we were. So if we do this, let's say we do pwd, you can see that this is now the actual location where we are. So the home location that have the Peter is indicated by the tilde sign. The tilde is a sign above or one step above or before your key one, right? The key one. Your tilde is one step before it. That's the key before that. You use shift and you can get a tilde. On my keyboard, that is where a tilde can be found. So a tilde is actually the user directory. So if you want to, for instance, like I did ls here, and I saw all of the folders that are within that directory, right? And I navigated to desktop. You notice that it is still, I'm still in my parent directory, which is a tilde, and I am going to desktop. Is that okay? So this is the full location of my desktop. Or you can say this is the full location of my desktop, depending on the location where you are. Depending on the location where you are, right? So I can still do CD. Let me move to downloads, for instance. So I can do CD to downloads, right? So bash home disk is no such directory found. That's to say, I am actually, trying to access something bigger than me, a directory that is one step behind me, or 2 steps or 3 steps behind me, which is the home/Peter directory, right? Already with me being on this directory, I have, I've overshot myself because I'm trying to move from one location to another, right? So this will not work for me. Is that okay? Because that's not the actual location of my, download. But if I do something like this, I use the tilde, Mind you, I'm using CD to change directory to /downloads. So I can move from this folder to this folder. But remember, I have to call the parent directory, which is the tilde, before the folder I am going into. So just understand the concept that before you move into a particular location, you should be able to know the full paths of that location, right? So for instance, if I am on my, maybe I'm on a different, maybe on the root location now, I can, navigate to my home directory and then to the particular directory I want to move into using my CD command. So CD command in general helps us navigate around, just like we can see on our desktop, our what's it called, the Windows-based machine, right? You see that you can navigate from one folder to another. So what you are doing, you are actually doing a CD command, right? That is what we are actually doing. So this mouse click that we are coming here to click is actually the CD command that has been redesigned, right, into the mouse click to enable us, switch from one location to another. And for those of us that use, operating system those days, most of these commands we are running, right, can also be run on our Windows machines, right? But Windows has its own types of command, right? So like we can do, instead of ls here, we can do dir, right? To list out the content of this location that we are. You can see the location that I am on the user location. So the dir here lists out all what we saw initially when I took us to that user on my C drive, right? I took us somewhere here. This, and this. So I took us somewhere here. So automatically, when you put your system, it takes you to the user account, which is this point. But desktop, what Microsoft did was to modify the desktop and put it in this way it is, the graphical user interface way, so that when you boot your system up, instead of booting you to, this point where we have all of this, instead of this now being like the first point where your machine boots you to, right? It just picks out the desktop, customize it, and program the operating system to, boot us to desktop like this, right? Otherwise, this is like the root, the default, a location when you boot your operating system as a user. So for Windows, you can use dir for ls. We can also navigate into any of the folders. For instance, we want to navigate into music, for instance. We can use CD also, right? CD music, you can see that it has navigated into the music, right? So just know that these things, even on Windows, it works. So we can dir on Windows, right? And it gets us this. So why you need to know all of these commands, right? Is because you can maybe carry out a hack and you will be presented with a Windows-based command prompt. So you should know what and what to do, right? You should know what and what to do around it. So by typing the help command, will give you almost all the commands you can use on your Windows machines, right? So these are various commands. You can see the CD command here. You can see the check disks if you want to check disks. You can see the copy, delete, dir directory. You can see echo command. So there are several commands that you can see here. The make directory command, right? The rename, the replace commands, the remove commands. So these are various commands that you can see on your Windows-based operating system. But on the Linux machine, it doesn't appear this way, right? It doesn't appear this way. So let's go back to our Linux terminals. So I guess we are toggling around the three of them, and you can see how they work, right? So these commands, if we were to learn Windows and there is no clicking or there's no graphical user interface on Windows, right? We'll be learning this. We'll be learning all of these commands, right? So that is what we are doing with Linux. We're actually learning the commands because Linux does not have the GUI like Windows has, right? So that is why we are on this point where we are learning this. Is that okay? So you can navigate from using your CD from one location to another. Now, mind you, Linux does not have the help command just like Windows has. So if you want to understand some of the commands in Linux, you have to, go and get a cheat sheet, right? There are a lot of cheat sheets, Linux cheat sheets that you can actually get, right? So you can do the Linux cheat sheets and download the one that you can actually use for your practice, right? Just for you to understand the Linux commands. You can see there are several of them. You can see the ls and you can see their description. So like I told us, some of these commands, when we are in our material that will be given to us, some of these commands will be actually listed there so that we go ahead and practice them and play around with them. So you can see some of the commands we have talked about, how they are also being used here. You can see the ls-l and other, you can see the read, write, and execute permission that we talked about, no permission. So there are a lot of commands that if you want to learn or you want to understand how to play around your Linux, you can go ahead and learn them. Just go look for a Linux cheat sheet, although we'll have that in our materials that will be issued out to us, and then you can play around with commands. So we'll still look at some few commands, and then we'll have a task. Our task is to go and get at least 50 Linux-based commands, get a cheat sheet, and practice all of those commands so that when we come and we are looking at commands, or I use a particular command, we will not be lost, right? So that is our task for tomorrow or before our next meeting, right? Before our next meeting, please make sure you have mastered at least 50 Linux commands and know what they can do. Okay, what I will just do for us is to get a particular cheat sheet like the one we are building. I'll get it across to us. And our task will be for us to master the 50 commands that will be listed on that cheat sheet. So we'll drop that for us, hopefully before our next class, so that we can get our hands dirty and play around with that, right? So you can see how we have navigated. So I want to, enough of playing around with Ubuntu. Let me play around with Kali also, right? So we can navigate to, we can, let's say we do ls to see what we have on our desktop. We have desktop, we have download. So let's say we want to, access the desktop. Now, some of you might be wondering why we will do, or why we will navigate to our desktop and we will not see these items that are there, right? You see that I did CD to desktop and I'm on the desktop, but if I do an ls to list out what is on my desktop, it's telling me that nothing is on my desktop. But you know that we have the home, file, and trash on our desktop. So these are actually, how do I put it now? Let's say shortcuts that are not actually showing on your desktop. They are just showing for you to see them. They are not actually sitting on this desktop that we are seeing, right? So, but there are shortcuts that allows you to, know that, okay, this is actually the Linux desktop. But they are not, files or directories on your desktop. Is that okay? So you will not see them. So let's go ahead and look at some more commands. The command we'll be looking at is a command that we use to make a directory or create a file, right? So the command what we want to achieve now, or the task we'll be doing now, is to make a folder, to make a file, right? So I want to make a file on my desktop. I want to make a file on my desktop. So let me navigate back to my desktop on, this PC on the Ubuntu also. So remember, I'll put my tilde and then a slash. So it has taken me back to my desktop. So on the both machines, we are in the same location, right? So if you do ls on your desktop on Ubuntu, you notice that there's nothing there. So let's make a folder. We use this command we call the make directory, mkdir, right? So I can decide to make a folder and name it Peter, right? Let me do that also here, mkdir, right? And name it Peter, right? So if I press enter here, you notice immediately that there's a folder created here. Same thing here, if I press enter, you notice immediately that a folder is created on my desktop, right? You can see it here that this folder is created. So the Peter folder is created on my desktop, both on my Ubuntu and my Kali. So that is how you create a folder, right? You use the mkdir command to create a folder. So if you go ahead and do your ls now, you should be able to see the folder that you created, right? Peter is there and Peter is there, right? And you can decide to say, okay, let's navigate into the Peter folder. You use your cd command and you can see the full part of Peter, of the Peter folder, right? So if you use your cd command here also to navigate to Peter, you see the full part of Peter, right? So let me clear my screen. So we are in the Peter folder, right? But the Peter folder, let's go ahead and look at what is inside. ls. So there's nothing inside the Peter folder. Is that okay? So, but we have created a folder. What I want us to do now is to create a file, right? To create a file, a document inside this folder. Now, there are several ways you can do that. But one of the simplest way I'm going to use is the echo. So I've introduced another command, the echo command, right? So I'll echo a particular thing into a particular file. And this is how we do that. We use the greater than sign to push whatever you are echoing into a particular location. Just look at how the command looks like, right? So we can say echo ethical hacking is sweet, right? We can echo that into a file and say, okay, the file should be a name called, should have a name called practice. I want the file to be a text file. So it will be practice.txt. Now it is very important that when you're naming your file, you should add an extension to it. On our Windows machine, you know that actually all our files have extensions, right? I have actually pressed enter and it has listed, it has entered into that folder, right? So if I do my ls now, you notice that I have the practice.txt within that folder. Now, I was explaining something to us, right? If you come to our files where we have, like all of these files, if you see a file here, you know that there's actually an extension. There are extensions attached to it. For instance, your document file will bear the docs, right? So let me clear and do this. Okay, here is CLS. So if you're on Windows, you use CLS, right? CLS is clear for Linux, right? So you can use CLX to clear your screen. So I am back to my user. Let me navigate to my desktop, right? So I'm on my desktop now. So let me go ahead and, okay, CLS is not recognized, right? So I'll use the arrow. So you can see all of the items listed on my desktop are listed here, right? So I want to access one of the folders that I have here. So let me access the folder materials, right? So I can do cd materials. So I'm in the materials folder. Let me do my dir arrow. So I've listed all of the files that are in that material folder. Now, what I just did is the same thing as we coming to this new folder, clicking on it. Okay, I think, was it the new folder I accessed?
Material.
Okay, material folder. Okay, where is the material? Okay, this is the material folder that I accessed. So I just opened the material folder and you can see the content of the material folder. And you can compare it with what we have here. You notice that they are the same, right? We even have some hidden folders that are here that are listed here that are not here. So it's telling you that you have 3 directories and 9 files. You can see that all the files that are here have their extensions. Yes, you can see their extensions. Is that okay? So this .exe is an extension, .docx is an extension, right? .exe here, .ova here, .ova, except directories. It's only directories that don't have, extensions. Is that okay? And in Windows, how do you know directory? Windows will tell you that it is a directory by, highlighting it this way, right? So you can see here, normally if you look at this, you will not see their extensions, right? But when you are using your terminal user interface, you see the extension. So it's always good for you to, when you are naming your files, please include the extensions in the files, right? For easy understanding, right? So let's go back to our Linux. I've been able to create a file. What I just did was I used echo command. Ethical hacking is sweet. And I pushed it using this sign, the greater than sign. I pushed it into practice.txt, which is a file that I want to create, I created, right? So that is one way you can create a file. So when I did that, I moved to the next line and I used the ls, right? And now you can see the practice.txt is there. So let me look at ls-la, right? And see. So I have some hidden files there, right? And I have my practice.txt. So in my practice.txt, the root user has the read and write permission, but the executable permission is not there. That's to say this file cannot run as an executable file. Is that okay? Now the user does not have, the user can only read this file, right? But it cannot write into this file, and likewise the guests, right? So this is how you create a file, or one of the ways of creating a file. Actually, this is not a good practice. It's not a good practice, but it's actually good in the sense that, for instance, you have a folder or you have a file that is quite much, right? You can use this pattern to push in a particular content into that file. For instance, I can still add more stuff into this file. For instance, let me first of all view that file. I will use another command, the cat command, C-A-T, right? It's the command we use to, it's concatenate. So you use to force out, the content of a file. So I want to cat practice.txt now. So you can see the content of practice.txt. Ethical hacking is sweet. Now let's assume I want to push something else. I want to append something else into that file, right? I can just say ethical hacking is, okay, let me say ethical hacking is for the patient ones, right? So if I want to append this, instead of using one of this sign, I will use 2 of it, right? And push it back into that file. If you go ahead and cut our file again, you'll notice that it is now 2 lines. So where this pattern is actually important or useful is maybe you have finished writing a code and there's a line, or you want to add a line. You can just do that on this and then push it into that file, right? So that is where this is quite important. So you can see that we have looked at several commands. We have looked at echo, we have looked at cat, we have looked at ls and all whatnot. So let's go ahead and clear our screen. Let me do history to see what we have looked at so far. So these are what we have done so far, right? So this is what you use to catch the thief, right? When you are in a system, you can just go ahead and look for the history of that system to know what and what the person has done, right? Sorry about that. So the next thing we'll be doing is to, let's remove that file that we have created. So we use the remove formula, the remove command to do that, right? We have the practice, so you can just use rm for remove, and you can remove practice.txt. And that is gone. You can see that there's nothing in that file. Yeah, so those are the commands that we'll be looking at today. I want to delve into some other types of commands, which we refer to as networking commands, right, on Linux. Now, all what we have been looking at is moving around, trying to access a document or a file. That is what we have been looking at rather. So we want to also see, commands that, have to do with networking, right? And one of such command is the IP command, the command you use to determine the IP address of your Kali machine. For instance, this is a Kali machine. What is your IP address? You might not know. On Windows, there are several ways you can actually look at or look for your IP address. On Windows, you can actually go to your internet or Open Network Sharing Center. Those of us that like clicking, right? So let's open that. Okay, I don't know why my network sharing center isn't opening. Okay, so in Windows, you can go ahead and do something like ipconfig, right? To get the IP address of the system. This is the IP address of my Windows machine, right? So, but in Kali or Ubuntu or a Linux-based system, it's not IP config. You use the if config, right? So the if config is the command you use to determine your, what is it called? Your network, or your IP address rather. So let me go ahead and do that here also. So this is not installed. So this is why I told us that, okay, on Ubuntu, there are several other files that are not installed, right? So for those of us using Ubuntu, you have to go online and learn or study how to install these network tools on your Ubuntu. Now that is because the current Ubuntu, I think there is maybe there's a problem with it because we have tried installing using the commands that you're supposed to use, but it is still not installing. So we need to do further research to know why that is happening the way it is happening. So normally this is the command you are supposed to use. You put in your password and then it installs, right? But unfortunately, I think I tried installing it earlier. It wasn't working for me. It wasn't installing. I wouldn't know if it is my network or maybe the Ubuntu machine is cracked or something, right? But this is how you go ahead and install. Just go ahead and use the sudo app install nettools, right? So it will install all the nettools that you need. So most times when you try to run some of these commands on Ubuntu and it's not running, please go ahead and install them. But on Kali, it is actually running, and you can see my IP address on my Kali machine. Now, this, okay, let me see if that is installed here already. So you see that it is installed running. So it has given me, you see that this is the IP address, the same with this, right? So now this IP address is actually the IP address of our virtual machine, right? The IP address of the virtual machine we are sitting on. That is the IP address we are seeing here. So if you want to, carry out our task, or subsequently when we are carrying out our task, we have to, go ahead and set our network, right, on the virtual machine to bridge, right, so that it can actually distribute networks to, multiple systems that are connected to our virtual box. So we'll be looking at that maybe when we start doing more on, trying to access the other machine from this machine, right? So we'll do that. We'll do that. So it's still giving us the same IP address. Okay, I think this has changed. For this, it has changed. It has given us this IP address. But for this, I think we will have to restart the system before it can, give us an IP address that will look in this format, right? So this is the IP address of this machine. Why this one is still maintaining the IP address of our VMware, of our virtual box, right? But if you want to access these guys, like we told us, this is a lab. So this is assumed to be a different operating system sitting on a different location. And this is also assumed to be a different operating system sitting on a different location, right? So they shouldn't, have the same IP address. And that is why we are using the bridged network, right? To do that. So that is that for that. And we can go ahead and understudy IP addresses. Our study IP address, I told us initially that we need knowledge of IP address, right? And this is the net mask. Like we all know, what the net mask helps to achieve here is to enable us determine the number of hosts that can be assigned on this network, right? The number of hosts that can be assigned on this network. I believe we all have idea on what classes of IP addresses are, right? So that is that. Let's go ahead, practice that. Let me also see this. You can see that our machines, let me see if they are on the same network. You can see that both our Windows machine and the Ubuntu machine are on the same network, right? The Windows machine and the Ubuntu machine are on the same network. This is the network, 192.168.60.0 network. So you can see this guy is giving .116 as host, and this guy is giving .239 as host. So the two systems can, now we are using another command, the ping command. So the two systems can handshake themselves. So that is what the ping command helps you achieve. The ping command is the command that helps you check or test for connectivity, whether the other system is on or alive, right? By being alive, we are saying whether you are connected. So we have been able to ping the other system. We have used our Windows operating system, and we have pinged the Ubuntu machine, which is this IP address, right? It has sent some packets to us, right? You can see reply from this. It's replying. There's reply from this. So it's telling you that there's actually a reply from this. So the ping command helps you to know if an IP address or a system is on or not, right? And vice versa, we can ping 192.168.60. What is the Windows machine now? The Windows machine is 239. So we can also ping that, right? Okay, we can ping that, but you notice that it is not giving reply. So that can be, it doesn't mean that there's no connection between them, but it does mean that there might be a delay or a network, a slow network, right? You can see the network appears to be slow, and that is why it is not giving us replies here, right? Now let's look at, this is the broadcast, and this is also the broadcast IP address. Where's the default gateway here? So whichever way, we can see that this machine and this machine are actually sitting on the same network, right? They're actually sitting on the same network, but there's a problem here. This machine, though, is sitting on the same network with this machine. Their broadcast address is different. Their broadcast address is different, right? So this is typical of a router, right? When a router assigns an IP address to a particular segment of network and gives out a particular broadcast address. So that network is different from the other network that has a different broadcast IP address. We are going to see that as we progress when we will be talking about IP addresses. So go ahead and play around with those commands. So we have looked at two commands, the ping command and then the IF and IP config command. So raising your hand, just go ahead and type on the chat box. If you have questions, please, we'll look at them and take it from there, right? So somebody is saying the sudo app is not working. So it should work, right? So let me bring out that command. So this is the command I use, sudo app install nettools, right? Sudo app install nettools. That is the command you should use to install that. So it should work for you on your Ubuntu, but on your Kali, just go ahead and type whatever you want to type, it will work, right? So there's another command we want to look at. That command is the net discover, right? The net discover is also not installed on Ubuntu, right? So like I told us, if you are using Ubuntu, you'll be installing almost every command that you need, right? So let's go ahead and install net discover and see if it will install, right? So the net discover is installing. Let's come to our Kali and try net discover. So if it is requesting for password, you put in the password, your password, the one you used while you were creating your account, right? The password you used while you were creating your account, while you were actually designing the account. So I used Peter for mine, and that is why I'm using Peter as my password. So net discover here, they are saying you must be root to be able to run net discover. Please type in your password. Okay, not in sudo as file. Well, I wouldn't know where you are installing from. Please, are you installing from your Ubuntu or from your Kali? So on Kali, before you can run the net discover, you have to be, you have to have the root privilege, right? So that is what it's saying here. You must be root to run this, right? So if you must be root to run this, I just have to add the sudo. So what sudo is another command for super user do net discover. So you are telling super user to do net discover for you. So I go ahead and press enter. Let me also try net discover on the Ubuntu. So you must be root, right? So let me also do my sudo and then go ahead with net discover. So what net discover does is it lists out all the IP addresses or it tries to discover over your router the types of the IP addresses that are connected to your routers. right? So most times when an attacker gets into a system, right, what he does is to run net discover, try to discover all the PCs that are connected. You can see there is a MAC address of the PC, right? So there's the IP address, there's a MAC address of the PC. The device vendor is unknown, right? So if you have multiple systems connected, he can look at all of them and carry out an attack like maybe IP spoofing or MAC address spoofing rather, right? So he can actually do that. On Ubuntu, your app, I don't know why, can you just type in the command that you used? Type it and drop. Let me see if you actually did the command well, right? So Net Discover is actually discovering all of the systems that are connected. You can see the 239. The 239 that is our Windows, machine. So it has discovered it. Okay, actually our Windows machine is, yes, 239, right? That's discovered the default gateway also. This is a default gateway, right? Not the default gateway of this network, but the default gateway of a network that the router has given out. That is what it is detecting now. So you can see our Windows machine's IP address and the MAC address is here. And you can see it is telling you that it is an Intel Corporation of, device, right? So it's telling you a lot of things you need to know about the machine, the operating system. So even at this stage, an attacker can just connect and carry out an attack on you, right? So far so good. These are the commands we'll be looking at. As time goes on, when we get playing around our Linux machine, we will be, learning some more commands, right? We'll be learning some more commands. The sudo app install net tools should work for you. I don't know why it is not working for you, but that should work for you, right? Maybe what we'll do is after the class, maybe if not today actually, maybe you just draw my attention, maybe we'll do maybe a video call or whatever, so that I can see what you are doing. But I think it should work for you, right? So with this, we have come to the end of today's session. We want to open rooms. If you have questions, please drop them on the chat box. We'll read them for us. Otherwise, we would end the class here for today, right? Also, let me say this. The class, we intend to, let me do this, please.